Good morning.
64b at the Mishnah, right at the top of the page.
54b.
Yeah, 4 lines in at the Mishnah. Mitzvah Omer. A lot about serious about the Omer offering now. Mitzvah Omer lahalim in a karov. There's a mitzvah to bring the barley from the closest place to Yerushalayim. Lo bikir akar Yerushalayim avino so mikol makom. If it's not ripe, it's not ready from the nearest places where the barley grows next to Yerushalayim, then you can bring it from wherever you want. Okay. Ma'aseh sheba haomer migagos tzrifin v'shtei lechem mi because ayin sukar. So we'll see more about this in the Gemara. There's a story that the omer came, the barley came from a place called Gogos Tzrifin, and the 2 breads, the wheat, came from a place called Mi Bekas Ein Sukar, which were far, very far from Yerushalayim. So you see that this actually happened, that they brought it from a place that's far from Yerushalayim, and therefore, if the ones that are close aren't ripe, aren't ready, then you can bring it from there. Okay. My time up. What's the reason that you have to bring it from close by? Why is it the ideal way to do it? So 2 reasons. Mishum Carmel, the word in the Torah describing the Omer says you should bring it Carmel. So right now the Gemara understands Carmel is a combination of Rachmal, which is very soft. It's much softer when you bring it close. If you bring it from far away and if the wind gets it, it's going to become much harder along your journey. So better to bring it as soft as possible. So Rachmal, soft and full of grain. Yeah, really not full, but really rach umal. Mal means that you could put in your hand and you could it's very soft. If you bring it from far, so then the wind's gonna get to it and make it much harder. The ain ma'avir and all mitzvahs. General principle that one should not pass over mitzvahs. Pass over mitzvahs. So if you're going out to find the barley for the offering, so if you're leaving Yerushalayim and you're passing by a lot of good barley, that would be a problem of ein ma'avir and all mitzvahs. You shouldn't pass by mitzvah opportunity. You should do it as soon as possible. Okay, now here comes the story. Ma'aseh sheba omer mi gagos tzrifin. We had in the Mishnah that they actually brought the omer, the barley, from far away. Now here's a whole story that at the very end it'll come to this point. So, Tana Rabbanon kishetzaru malchei beis chashmonai ze al ze. So, I believe this is going to take place a while after the Hanukkah story, but the kings, the Hasmonean kings, they ze al ze, they each see Jerusalem. Haya Hyrcanos mi b'chutz. Hyrcanos was on the outside, but Aristobus mi b'fnim. I think their great grandparents were the ones involved in the Hanukkah story. So, and the kingdom passed down, and then there was a dispute amongst them. But so in this case, Hyrcanos ended up in the each split, but then they ended up coming to see Jerusalem. So Hyrcanos came; he was on the outside, and Aristobus was on the inside. Now, what would happen? Every day they would put some coins in a basket. So they would put some from inside Jerusalem. They put some coins in a basket, and they would go and they would put it over the wall. Somebody would take the coins and put in a lamb, and that would be the korban tamid. That would be the tamid offering. Now, Hayasham Zakin Echad, one guy inside, was a wise man. He understood Shayamakir b'chachmas Yivanis. He understood the knowledge of the Greeks. He understood the Greeks. So, laws lahem b'chachmas. He whispered to them, or he motioned to them, and he said as follows: Amar lahem kol zman sha'asukim ba'avoda. So, listen, guys. As long as the Jews have their temple offerings, have their tamid offering, you're not going to win. Ein nimsar b'yadchem. There's no way you're going to win the battle. Lemachar. Shilshulahan dinarin bekupa, vehelahan chazir. The next day, they put the same coins in a basket, put over the fence, put over the wall, And then the person, instead of giving them the offering, the Talmud offering, the daily Talmud offering, he gave them a pig. So Helu and Chazir. Kevan Shigila Chatzia Choma. Once the pig got to half the wall, halfway up, Naatz Tziporna B'choma. It put its hands, put its feet into the wall. V'nizdazdei Eretz Yisrael. And the land of Israel shook because of the anger of Hashem at the disgrace of his name that they're offering that they're going to be offering a pig up. So yeah. So it shook 400 parsa. Parsa. That amount, 400 parsa and 400 parsa. But also Shah, at that point, they announced as follows. Amru, Arushi, Gadol Chazir, first of all, curses the one who raises a swine, pig. The Arushi, Lamed Beno, Chachmas Yivanis. And curses the one who teaches his child the Greek knowledge. And that the story happened, they brought the barley from a place called Gagos Streifin and a place called, and the two breads by Shavuos were brought from Mibekas Ayin Sukkar. Okay. So now, interesting, the story continues. When the barley was brought, Kimata Omer, when it was brought, Lo have yadi mehecha aisi. They didn't know, they weren't aware from where did this barley come from. So now they couldn't figure it out. So Ichrizu, they made an announcement to figure out, like, where did this barley come from? So Asahu Charsha, a deaf person came. A mute person came. Osiv Chada Yada Igra. He put one hand on a roof, V'chada Yada Atrifa, and one on top of like a little tent, a little hut. Yeah. So Amar Lahu. So now he's trying to motion to them where the Omer came from. So his, like a game of charades, right? He puts one hand on a roof and one hand on the top of a hut. Amar Luhu Mordechai. So Rashi says this is the Mordechai from the Purim story. Tosa says it's hard to imagine because the Purim story happened before the Second Temple era, and this Chashmonaim happened. And this story happened about 100-something years later. So that's Tosa's question on Rashi. So how do they explain that if it's not Mordechai from the Purim story, who's Mordechai? So they say there's actually people that were appointed in the temple, and they would call them Mordechai. The way the Egyptian kings were called Paro, so certain people appointed in the temple were called yeah. So yeah. So the people that were very knowledgeable and very wise and they were all called Mordechai. So either Mordechai from the Purim story or Mordechai was the generic name for the wise men in the temple. Amr Luhu Mordechai. Mi ikaduchta. He said, one second. Is there a place, the Shema Gagos Tzrifin? Is there a place that's called basically roof hut? Is there such a place? Oh, Tzrifin Gagos or hut roof? Does that name of a place exist? But Kuveshkachu. So they went and they checked. They went and they checked and they found a place. Yes, there was a place called Gagos Tzrifin, the combination of the words roof and hut, and that was a real place. And from there was where the Omer was brought. When they went to bring the two breads for Shavuos, same thing happened. Where did this come from? Where does bread come from? So can you imagine nowadays, someone brings food to your house, doesn't say, oh, you want it, nothing. And there's a mute at your house, and somehow he motions to you, he points to, I don't know, to a word saying safe, and they point to the road. So he says, is there a place called Safeway or something like that, right? So he said, where did it come from? So they announced where did it come from. Also, who Gavra Charsha, the same mute person came, Osid Yada Eine, he put his hands on his eye. The Chada Yada Asikra, and he put his name and he put his hand on the door socket. Yeah, there was a hole by the doorposts that you would put the lock in, the place to lock the door, contraption of the lock. So he put his hands there. So now, Amar Lu Mordechai, Umika Dukha Deshmei Ein Sukar, or Sukar Ein, such a place called Sukar Ein or Ein Sukar. But yes, there was such a place, and they realized that's where the bread came from. Okay. Yeah. So now, Hanu Shalosh Nasim. So now we're going to show how wise this Mordechai was. What happened? Hanu Shalosh Nashim. The Aisu Shalosh Kin. So 3 women brought a set of 3 pairs of birds. They brought a set of 3 pairs of birds. And one of them said, Amra Lizivasi. One said, this is for my flow, simply implying she's a Zava Gedola when you have 3 days of seeing in the interim period, 11 days between the periods. So that makes you a Zava Gedola. For that, you got to bring 2 birds. One's a Chatas, one's a Ola. V'chada Amra Liyamasi. And one said, literally means for my days. And V'chada Amra Leonasi, for that time. So now, people thought, Savar Mina, they thought as follows. Zivasi, my flow is Zava Mamish. It's a real Zava. Liyamasi Mamish means my I'm flowing like the sea, right? And Leonasi is Leonasa, that she that when her time is up, meaning her 8th day, meaning after 7 days of having clean, after 7 days of not seeing, on her 8th day she has to bring. And all of these sacrifices, the kula chada chatas chada ola, they all consist of 1 sin offering and 1 ola offering. Amar lehu Mordechai. Mordechai says, Shema. He says, no, not so fast. Shema bizov sikna. Maybe the first lady, she was feeling very dangerous. She had a hemorrhage, and she was flowing much more, and she's on the verge of dying. And on that, she vowed that when she gets better, she's going to bring 2 offerings. That's one. The other lady that said, my sea, Shema biyam sikna, maybe she traveled overseas. And she also, it's very dangerous. And she said, okay, if I survive, I'm going to bring these offerings. And then Shema be'ena sikna. And maybe also she had a danger in her eye. She said, okay, if I survive, I'm going to bring these offerings. So if that's true, then the kulu olos ninhu, they're all going to be ola offerings, not sin offerings. So baduk ve'eshkach, they went and they checked. And next page, and they were right. Mordechai was right. That in fact, when they said these 3 things, it was referring to the way Mordechai interpreted it and not the way that people thought. The Hainu Ditnan, and that's the mission that says in Masechah Shkalim, Zem Mordechai, this is Mordechai. So then if that's true, Lamanik Rishmo Psachia, why do they call Mordechai Psachia? Sheposeyach Dvarim, the Dorshin, because he's able to, the word Psachia from the word Pasuach, open, he's able to be Poseyach Dvarim, to open up words. Right? He took these words of these women and he opened them up, the Dorshan, and expanded on them, and the Yodea B'Shivalash, and he knows all 70 languages. So on the last part that says that he knew 70 languages, well, that's not so impressive because Kulu Sanhedrin, meaning it's impressive, but it's not unique to Mordechai. The whole Sanhedrin, the great court, knew 70 languages. Damar Rabbi Yochanan, Ein Moshim Sanhedrin. We don't put someone on the Sanhedrin unless Balei Chachma, they're very knowledgeable. Balei Mara, they're of good appearance. Interesting. Balei Koma, sounds like they're tall. People should fear them and they shouldn't lie. Be more, intimidating people. Balei Zikna, people that are older. Balei Kshav, people that know witchcraft. So that if someone comes, they know how to judge them. Don't judge someone for witchcraft. You have to know what it is. And the last thing was V'yodim Shivim Lashon, and they know 70 languages. Why is that important? Because if someone comes with claims, right, you don't want to hear their claim through another party, an interpreter, because there'll be a game of broken telephone. This way, if you know 70 languages, so then we won't have this problem. So what did it say about Mordechai was so unique? He knew 70 languages. El Have Bayil Lishne Vidarish. He was able to combine languages, and interpret. Behind the Ksiv and Mordechai Balshan. And that's what it said by Mordechai, that they called him Balshan, as like a mixture of languages. Bal Lashon, meaning they would mix languages. Like in our case, he was able to interpret these words in a way. He was able to take different words from different languages and interpret them and understand them. Yeah. Okay. Okay, fine. So that's that. Says the Mishnah. Now, there's going to be a lot of talk now about the fact that the Torah refers to the day you bring the Omer as Mimacharas HaShabbos. Literally means the day after Shabbos, which means it doesn't have a set day on the calendar. It's not going to be the 16th of the month. The day after Pesach starts. Pesach is set in stone. It's the 15th. The day after that is the 16th. If you say it's the day after Shabbos, so then, it sounds like the first Shabbos after, the holiday, that's Sunday. That's not really set in stone. And there's a group of people that believe in that. And so we did a lot to outdo their ridiculous claims. So that's what we're going to talk about now. Kate said, Hein Osim. So what would they do? Shluchei Bezdin Yotzin Erev Yantiv. They would leave on Erev Yantiv. Osin Osan Krichos B'Mechubar. So they'd go Erev Pesach, and they would go and tie up the sheaves of barley to make it easier to reap the next day. To be easier to reap. Kol ha'ayaros hasmuchos l'sham miskanson l'sham. When it came time for the reaping, so everybody in the surrounding area would gather together. Like nowadays they gather for protests. So here they would gather for the reaping to make a big noise. This will be a big public display. Kadeshi and Nikta. All the news was there, all the reporters. Kevan once got dark, Amr Lahan would say, Shemesh, has Omer Hain, Ba Shemesh, sunset, Omer Hain. So they waited for the sun to set, and now it was the 16th. Then he would say, Magos, were you sick? Omer Hain, Magos, Omer Hain, and yes. And they would put a zoo basket. We're going to put the grain into Omer Hain. Kupazu, Omer Hain, yes. They would ask it again. That's all if it would happen on a weekday. B'Shabbos, they would say, Omer Lahan, Shabbos Zu. This is Shabbos, Omer Hain, so if the 16th would be on Shabbos, right? Would say today Shabbos, yeah. Today Shabbos, yeah. They say Ektor, I could reap the Haimon Loktor, reap, which right the others held always the day after Shabbos. It's on Shabbos itself. Ektor are going to reap the Haimon Loktor, reap. So they would say Shalosh Pa'amal Kol Davar V'Davar. Each thing they would ask it 3 times. I'm going to reap. I'm going to reap. This sickle, this sickle, this sickle. Today Shabbos, today Shabbos, today Shabbos. Always 3 times. The Hain Omer Lo Hin, and they would say yes. Why would they do such a public display? So ask the same thing 3 times. Kol Kach Lama Mipnei HaBaitusim, because of this group of people that are called the Baitusim, that say that the Omer is not reaped on the first day Chol HaMoed, right? If you have one day of Yom Tov, first day Chol HaMoed, Ela b'motzai Shabbos. Lefikach hakotrim. So that they say that it's not. We don't reap on after Yom Tov. Rather, we reap after Shabbos. They make a whole public display coming to Shalom that they're wrong. Now, there was something called Megillus Tainus during the Second Temple period. They listed a number of days where you'd have to fast, or you would eulogize. Number of holidays were like the things that happened. In that list was the following: Taner Banan, Elin Yomai Delolahis Ana. These are the days that you cannot fast. Bahon. Umiktsashon Delola Misa Bahon. And some of these days eulogize. They're more festive days. So when is that? So it says as follows: Meireish Yarcha de Nisan, coming up soon, from the beginning of the month of Nisan until the 8th. Ad Tamya Bey. Why? Itkum Tamida, because that's when the Talmud offering was reestablished. As we'll see later on, there was when do you bring the Talmud? The Baitusim thought it was at one time reading the Torah literally. I think we're going to see that they thought you could bring a Talmud offering, a daily offering, as a personal sacrifice. That's what it says. And if you have the oral Torah, so they're going to be proven wrong that you only can bring it as a communal offering. So it was in this time period that they established the law the way it's supposed to be, and therefore that's a festive day, and therefore you can't fast on these days, and you can't eulogize on these days. Delola misbid, that you can't fast on. Umitamya bay va'at sof mo'ada, from the 8th day until the end of the holiday, until the end of Pesach, Isusiv Chaga Deshvuya. They established the holiday of Shavuos. There's also a question: when do you do that? Because once again, if you hold that the Omer is always the day after Shabbos, so there's going to be a different calculation that we're going to see how they calculate when Shavuos is. So because you have to start counting also the day after Shabbos. So then Shavuos is always going to be on a Sunday. But we know you start counting the day after Pesach, after the first day Pesach. And therefore Shavuos is whenever it is, but it's after that. So it was in that time period that they established the holiday of Shavuos. So the low limit Merei Shechad and Nisan. Sorry. Isusiv Chagadish Shvuyaya. Okay. The low limit Merei Shechad and Nisan Atam Yebe. It took him to Mida. From that first day of Nisan till the 8th day of Nisan, so the Talmud was established, and therefore you shouldn't fast. You shouldn't fast, and you shouldn't eulogize. Tzedukim omrim. So it's interesting here. It switches to tzedukim, not baitusim. I'm not exactly sure what the difference is. The tzedukim omrim, they would say as follows: Yachid misnadiv maybe tamid. And an individual can donate a daily offering. Why would they say that? My darsh as the kavas achal taseh baboker, veis kavas hasheni taseh ben harbayim. What we read on Rosh Chodesh, that one can bring a kavas, one can bring the lamb, an individual can bring it. So how did we respond to them? It sounds like why not? It says an individual can bring it. Maya Hadru, how do we respond? It says, "As korbani lachmi ishai tishmeru." You should keep my in these verses it says, "As korbani lachmi isha," that my sacrifice should be reach nichochi. It should be a pleasant fragrance. Tishmeru, they shall guard. So meaning they shall guard, implying that that's plural, not singular. That all of the sacrifices, meaning the daily sacrifice, should come from mitrumas halishcha. It should come from the communal funds. So all those sacrifices over there in the midbar, 28 chapters, should come from the communal funds, including the communal sacrifice. So okay, mitamya be matsof ma'ada yisos chagad from the day they established the Shavuos. The Lola Misfit, so that you shouldn't fast, and you shouldn't eulogize on those days either. Shahayu Baitusin Omrim, the Baitusin would say Atzeres Achar Shabbos. Shavuos always came after Shabbos. So now, Nitpo Lahem Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. One time, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai joined them. He joined them. The Amar Lahem Shotim, you fools. Minayin Lachem. From where do you know that you do Shavuos on a Sunday? So now, Velo Haya Adam Echad Shayim Meshiva. Nobody answered Rabbi Yochanan. Either they didn't know, maybe they're too intimidated by him to answer. Except for one elder, Chut Mizakin Echad, that basically was going to answer a ridiculous answer. There's always that one guy, right? Shaya Mefatfeit Kenegdo. He was sort of, Mefatfeit to aggravate him, to taunt him. The Amar, and he said as follows. Now, it says in Mishlei that answer a fool according to his foolishness. So the guy offered a ridiculous response. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is going to take his response and offer him a ridiculous rebuttal. So the Amar like this: Moshe Rabbeinu Ohev Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu loved the Jewish people. He knew that Shavuos is only one day. So what did he do? Amar v'tikna achar Shabbos kedei sheYisrael is angin shnei yamim. So therefore, Moshe established Shavuos after Shabbos. Now you have 2 days of enjoyment. That's how I know that Shavuos is on a Sunday. So to that, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai responded, Karlov Mikrazeh. It says Achadasar Yomi Chorev Derech Har Seir. They went 11 days from Har Sinai. Derech Har Seir. Turn the page, and now, if he really went through the path of Har Seir, they would have got to Eretz Yisrael in a place called Kadesh, which is right next to Eretz Yisrael. They could have got there in 11 days. So says Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Vi Moshe Rabbeinu Ohev Yisrael, Haya, Lama Ichron b'Midbar Arbaim Shana. They had 11 days. They could have got right next to the border of Israel. And instead, Moshe, who loves Israel, took him around for 40 years. That's not a display of love. So the elder responded, Amarlo, Rabbi, Bekach atapatrani. With that, you have exempt me, meaning you've silenced me. I have no response to you. I answered a foolish answer, and you gave me a response, and therefore that was that. Silence them. Yeah. So now, Amarlo. So now, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai told him, Shota, you fool. Velote Torah shlema shalanu kisicha v'tela shalachem. So before, he didn't answer him in a real way. Now, I guess he saw that the fool came around, so now he's going to answer him. He said, don't let our complete, perfect Torah be like your mundane, wasteless speech. So, you're trying to interpret the Torah to make up things that you want. I'll show you that our Torah is complete, and then I'll show you. So we have a proof, and you don't have a proof. What's our proof? It says in the Torah that Tisperu Chamishim Yom. On the one hand, it says they shall count 50 days. Now, Tosfos points out we never count actually 50 days. We only count 49 days. So either it means you count until day 50, right? You count 49. So it says you should count 50 days. It means until day 50, and then day 50 is now it's counted as the 50th day. Not that you're practically counting today's day 50, but it's that day that you celebrate, or either it's up until day 50. That's what it means. Up until, or no, it means day 50. Not that I'm counting today's day 50, but it means I'm counting and then on day 50 is going to be the holiday. Either way, the Torah says you should count 50 days. Uksiv v'kasav echad omer, and another pasuk says sheva shabbosos, 7 weeks to mimos tiana, should be complete weeks, implying the week starts on a Sunday after Shabbos. You should go Sunday to Sunday. That should be 7 complete weeks. But which one is it? 50 days after Pesach, meaning after the first day of Pesach, which is not always going to be a Sunday, or 7 complete weeks of Sunday to Sundays. Contradiction. Haketa, what do you do? Says the Gemara, the answer is Kan b'yontiv shechalios b'Shabbos. When Pesach falls out on Shabbos, the first day of Pesach, then you'll have Sunday to Sunday. There'll be 7 complete weeks. Kan b'yontiv shechalios Shabbos. But on Pesach, let's say like this year, so then you would start counting on Thursday night. So there, you're not going to have 7 complete of Sunday to Sunday. Rather, be how you do it. So that was his rebuttal to this guy. Now we're going to have 5 more proofs. 5 more proofs about Shavuos not being always on a Sunday. So the sign is Rabbi Eliezer, Sofer, Rabbi Eliezer counts, Rabbi Yeshua Moner, Rabbi Yeshua also counts. Another word. So Rabbi Eliezer Omer Eino Tzarech. That proof. I have another proof for you. Hare Omer Tisparach. You shall count. So meaning it's accounting which is dependent on you. What does that mean? Svira Teluya Bebezdin. It's a counting which is dependent on the Bezdin. Not accounting that's set in stone. Accounting that's dependent on you. Shehem Yodin Lechadesh Mimachar. What's accounting that's dependent on the Bezdin? It means it's a holiday which is determined by the court. The court determines when the new month is. By the seeing of the new moon, that's when the court renews. That's when the court renews. That's when the court establishes the new month. So every holiday is established by the new month. Now, that comes to exclude Yatzta Shabbos Bereshis Shesirasa B'Chaladam. Shabbos Bereshis means it's just referring to the 7th day of the week. So the 7th day of the week is not dependent on the court. That's set in stone in every in the calendar. That Shabbos is the 7th day of the week. But the holidays are not set in stone. The holidays are dependent on the court. So now, that's Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, Rabbi Yeshua says, Amra Torah Mana Yamim v'Kidesh HaChodesh, Mana Yamim v'Kidesh HaTzeres. The Torah says you should count days and establish the month. You should count days and establish Shavuos. It says in the verse, what is it? Mana, meaning the Torah tells us to count days and establish the Chodesh. I think that's based on a verse. Yeah. It says Ad Chodesh Yamim. You should count the days and establish the month. And then it says you should count 50 days and establish Shavuos. So we have a comparison between establishing the new month and establishing Shavuos. So I think the verse is right next to each other. I don't have the verse here, but I don't have the verse here. Okay. Yeah. Either way, it says Ma Chodesh Samach Libiaso Nicker. Just like a month is recognizable, the beginning of the month is recognizable because you have the new moon, so that's recognizable. Af Atzeres Samach Libiasa Nikeres. So too, Shavuos has to also come at a time that is recognizable, meaning just like the new month. Every new month is recognizable because it's the new moon. you clearly know what it is. So too, Shavuos has to be something which is clearly recognizable. Now, in this case, it's going to be that if Shavuos always follows the holiday, so then the holiday is always recognizable because it's the 15th of the month is set in stone. The same way the new moon is recognizable because now there's a new moon, so too the 15th of the month is also, everyone knows the 15th of the month. And therefore, you start counting at a time that's recognizable. If you're always going to have Shavuos on a Sunday, so a Sunday is not necessarily as set in stone as the 15th of the month, and therefore it's not going to be comparable to the new moon. So meaning, if Shavuos always has to be on a Sunday because we start counting on a Sunday, well, that's going to be the 16th, the 17th, the 18th. It depends. So if Pesach starts on a Monday, you'll start counting on the next Sunday. If Pesach's on a Tuesday, you'll count on Sunday. Pesach, that's not set in stone. So just like the new moon is set in stone, every new month has a new moon. Every 15th of the month is also established, and therefore Shavuos is very established. It always comes at a recognizable time. That's Rabbi Yeshua. Vim Tomar, maybe you'll ask, Atzeres la'olam achar Shabbos. So if you're going to tell me that Shavuos is always after Shabbos on a Sunday, what's happening before it that you know Shavuos is here today? By the new month, you know that it's a full moon, then you don't see it, then there's a new moon. Oh, before the new month is established, we have a new moon. What happens before Shavuos that makes it recognizable? The answer is, if you have it on a Sunday, then nothing. If you have it always following the 15th of the month, so that's something which is established and recognizable, and then the comparison is good. Rabbi Shmuel says, Rabbi Shmuel Omer as follows. He says, Amra Torah have a Omer b'Pesach, v'shtei lechem b'atzeres. Bring the barley offering on Pesach and the two breads on Atzeres. Mala holon regel, v'tchilas regel. Just like Pesach is a holiday and the beginning of the holiday, so too, that's when you bring the barley. So to Atzeres, afkan regel v'tchilas regel. So too, you bring the bread on Shavuos on a holiday, on the beginning of the holiday, meaning that we're comparing Shavuos to Pesach. Now, if you're always counting on a Sunday, then your Omer offering is not always going to be brought at the beginning of the holiday. Because once again, the 16th is always the second day of the holiday. It's always the beginning. But if Pesach is on a Monday or Tuesday, even a Wednesday, that Sunday is already 4 days later. Then you don't have a comparison to Shavuos. So just like Shavuos, you bring the two breads. It's at the beginning of the holiday. It's only a one-day holiday. Beginning of the holiday. So too, the Pesach has to be the same thing. And according to them, that's always going to be on a Sunday. So then that's not going to work. And last one is Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer. He says, Nemar Shabbos limala, v'nemar Shabbos limata. It says Shabbos in Vayikra, in the 23rd chapter, in the 15th verse. It says, Usvartem lachem mimacharas Shabbos. You should count the day after Shabbos. And it says in the next verse, Ad mimacharas Shabbos hashviyis tispru, until the day after the day after the Shabbos. You're going to count 50 days. So says the Gemara, Mala holan regel v'tchilas regel. V'tchilas regel samuchla. Just like the counting starts at the beginning of the month. Sorry, the other way. Just like Shavuos is at the holiday, at the beginning of the holiday. It's so meaning the Atzeres. The Atzeres is going to be, the Shavuos is going to be right next to the after the seventh week has passed, because Shabbos is referred, a week is referred to as Shabbos. So too, the verse before it that talks about the Sfiras Omer is also going to be at the beginning. So just like the Shavuos is going to be at the beginning, 1 second. Malahalan regel v'tchilas regel, just like that by Shavuos, it says that you're going to count. It says Shabbos, and there it's referring to regel v'tchilas regel, Shavuos, and it's going to be the beginning of the holiday. That's when you do two breads. V'tchilas regel samachla, and the beginning of the holiday is right next to it. Afkan regel v'tchilas regel samachla. So too by Pesach, it's going to, that you're bringing the Omer during the holiday at the beginning of the holiday. Meaning, just like by Shavuos, you start as soon as the 7 weeks are over, and their week is called Shabbos. You start right away Shavuos. So too by Pesach, in this case, Yom Tov is called Shabbos. So too you start right away after Shabbos, which Yom Tov is also referred to as Shabbos. So you have to always start right after Shabbos, whatever Shabbos is referring to. Either it's referring to a week, and therefore you start right afterwards, or in our case, by Pesach, it's referring to Yom Tov, because Yom Tov is also called Shabbos. So therefore we have a comparison between Shavuos starts right after whatever Shabbos is over there. So too, in our case, Shabbos refers to Yom Tov. It's going to start right after. Okay, maybe we'll start from this last thing tomorrow.